Hi guys, and welcome back to At Home with Elisa. If you're new here, hi and welcome, and if you're not new here, hello, it's been a little while. So it's been a few weeks since I've actually been in my garden and it looks terrible, but I have been a little bit under the weather, so I thought I had the spicy flu for a couple of weeks, but I kept testing negative, and then I completely lost my voice for I think nearly 2 weeks as well. So I've been a little bit under the weather, but I'm feeling so much better now, and I'm so happy to be back out in the garden again. So just to refresh your memory, before I actually got sick, I was doing my new garden maintenance routine. I realized that my garden should be absolutely bursting at the seams, and at the moment it definitely isn't. And I think that's because I didn't have a garden maintenance routine set up and working properly in my garden. So I covered day one was actually weeding and seeding, which I've done. Day 2 was planting, potting up and transplanting. I'll link both of these videos in the description for you if you want to have a look at them. But day 3 is today, and day 3 will be about pests, disease and fertilizing. So as I was saying, if I had my garden maintenance routine completely organized and I was doing everything, like every morning I come out into the garden and I do, apart from the last couple of weeks, and I do all my gardening, and if I had a normal garden maintenance routine, my garden would be absolutely bursting at the seams. Now I am getting produce, I am getting flowers, but I want to make sure that next year I have some really big goals. I'll talk more about those in another video, but I do have some really big goals, and I know that I'll have people relying on me, so I need to make sure that I have lots and lots of organization and that I can have lots of seeds being started regularly, flowers being clipped, produce being collected. So I need to make sure I get my garden maintenance routine down pat. So if you are new here, I recently moved from a residential suburban block with about 4 square meters of vegetable sort of flower cutting garden, and now I live in rural property and I have about 170 square meters of vegetable and flowering garden. So I'm definitely upscaling. I'm still relatively new to vegetable gardening. I have done flowers for a long time. I'm still learning a lot about vegetables, and I am actually doing an online course as well about vegetable growing, so it's definitely helping me. So as I mentioned, day 3 is all about pest, disease and fertilizing. So moving to this new property, we have definitely encountered a lot of different things that we didn't have to deal with back at our residential block. Obviously it's a lot bigger, but we have had some pests that we did not have down at our old house. So one of my main pests that I have had trouble with, I couldn't work out what was going on, and I actually tried using night vision cameras and everything to try and catch what was going on. Then one night we saw it. We saw a possum. So we know that there's actually at least 2 possums here, and they love my strawberries, they love my blueberries, they don't mind a green tomato. So they are stealing, and roses as well, they like rose heads. So they are stealing vegetables and fruit from my garden. So I need to make some changes for next season. I'm just sort of trying to think forward. I need to make some changes for next season so that I can obviously harvest the blueberries myself and the strawberries myself. So in my future garden plans, I actually plan on building another garden bed, and I'll see if I can find a photo, but I'm hoping to have a structure over the top of it which will actually net the garden bed itself. And strawberries and blueberries both like the same type of soil, so I'm thinking I'll keep them both underneath that netted area, and hopefully I will get to harvest more than the possums. I don't mind sharing, but I just would like some of them myself as well. Another pest that we've just recently encountered in our garden is goannas, which is otherwise known as lace monitors. They are a very large lizard, a very powerful, muscly lizard. They generally will be tending to try and get into the chicken coop to get the eggs. They're not really interested in the chickens, they're more interested in the eggs, but they have been known to kill chickens. So just recently we have found 2 of them. We've named them. So we have little Larry the lace monitor, he's about 1 meter long, and we have Gary the giant goanna. Now lace monitors and goannas are the exact same animal, but it's just we've just named them. So we have had them in the actual coop with the chickens, which was causing an almighty ruckus. So we come down here straight away and obviously let them out. Now we do have sticks positioned around the vegetable garden, on the entry into the garden and on the entry into the chicken coop. The reason being is that lace monitors can be quite aggressive. They're generally terrified of humans, but they can get used to humans. So therefore we need to come across as quite aggressive ourselves so that they don't want to be anywhere near this area here. So we're still trying that tactic, but the sticks themselves are actually there for our protection. So lace monitors, when they're under threat, or goannas when they're under threat, they generally will climb the nearest high thing, and if it happens to be a human, then so be it. Unfortunately, they have extremely sharp nails and they can really cause a lot of damage, and if you get bitten by one, that's even worse. That's let's get to the hospital kind of situation. So we have sticks around the property to try and help defend ourselves. So far it's been working. We've been like trying to terrify them so that they take off and climb a tree outside of the garden. We haven't lost any chickens as yet, which is more good luck than good management. So we've been running around reinforcing different fences and trying to create blockades so that they can actually stay outside of the garden. But lace monitors can climb trees, and we have wooden posts of fencing all the way around this garden area, so they can climb those, which they know, which is unfortunate because it really creates a bit of an issue for us. So if there is any Aussie gardeners watching this, can you please let me know if you have any idea on how we can help fortify this area so that we don't have lace monitors and goannas, because they are quite scary to encounter and I'd really like to keep them out of this area. There is a large property outside of this garden and I'd have no issue with them being in trees, but being so close to us and so close to the chickens, yeah, it makes me quite nervous. So if you know of anything, please let me know, because at the moment the only option we're looking at is maybe putting an electric fence around the very top of all of our fenced in garden area here. So yeah, I need suggestions please. So that covers the pest part of the video. Obviously possums are international, they're not just they're worldwide, they're not just Australia. Goannas definitely are Australian thing, but I hope that there's something useful from that for you. So the disease that I'm actually looking at today is scale, particularly scale on roses. Now back in July, I sprayed all of my roses. I cut them right quite back. That's when we cut back in Australia. I know it's different in America, but in Australia we need to cut them back in July. So to prune in June is to prune too soon, so you want to prune them in July. So in July I cut back all of my roses and I actually sprayed them with lime sulfur. I will link that video in the description, but lime sulfur is something that you want to spray your roses with when they're completely dormant, and it does help with a lot of fungal issues. Now when I was filming that video, I actually did something I probably shouldn't have done. I had one rose in particular, which is a sentimental rose. It's a children's rose, and it was given to us when our youngest child was born, and it had scale. It had quite a bad infestation of scale, and I chose not to cut it back because I was worried about losing it because it was struggling at the time. Just by fertilizing and giving it seaweed solution, it's really come on, and obviously we had quite the weather event earlier this year. That has ceased now almost, even though it's starting to rain on me now. That has ceased almost, and the rose has recovered, which is fantastic because I've got lovely new growth. But what I really should have done was actually cut that rose back quite hard, cut off all of that scale and treated it with white oil, which is what I'm actually going to be doing today. So white oil is a natural pest solution for scale. It's a product that obviously you spray onto the plant. It will stay on the plant. You don't want to use it in temperatures over 20 degrees or if it's starting to rain. So I will have to do this a little bit later this afternoon, I think. You don't want to do it if it's over 20 degrees because it is an oil and it will actually burn the plant. So you're best to do it either early in the morning or later in the afternoon when it is a little bit cooler. And what that white oil does is actually smothers the scale. So scale is a sap-sucking insect, and it will basically suck the life out of your rose bush. Scale can actually kill a rose bush if you're not careful. Thankfully it hasn't done that to my one, but I definitely need to make sure that I do treat it today. So pest, disease, and fertilizing, yay! So in my garden today, I am going to be using some sea salt. Sea salt is a product available here in Australia. It's a seaweed solution. There's a few on the market. I think I just have sea salt, so sea salt is what I'm using. And I will be just putting it onto some of the plants that look like a little bit lackluster, or they look like they might need a good feed. So I'll be walking around putting seaweed solution on the plants that really look like they need that little bit of extra help. They might be a little bit sickly. They might be something that really likes a little bit of extra fertilizer. I do water in the whole gardening receives a monthly fertilizer of seaweed solution. However, it's just nice to be able to top things up just once a week if I can get my garden maintenance routine and I can top up and I can feed the ones that really need that extra feed, then hopefully that will improve my garden and therefore also improve my soil. Another really good source of fertilizer is if you have a worm farm. So I have had a worm farm previously. We actually moved it here when we moved here. However, with the weather that we had, the weather event that we had, for those that don't know, we've had about 2.5 meters of rain last year, 2022, and all that rain actually just killed the worms. The worms got that wet. I couldn't keep them dry. The worms got that wet that they were actually climbing up out of the worm farm. So they all passed away. So I do have to get some worms again. But vermicomposting is a really good idea. The worms, obviously, it's their poop. Their poop that's really, really good. So if you can actually utilize some of that vermicompost around your garden will absolutely thrive on it. So it's something that I definitely need to get going again soon. The weather seems to have changed and we seem to have gone through that crazy period, so I need to make sure that I can get my worms going again and get that beautiful rich soil into the garden. The other type of fertilizer that I like to use in my garden, I have a product called Black Marvel that I use for my roses, and it's definitely time for me to feed my roses again. The roses love to be fed about every 6 weeks in the growing season, and I do give that to them. I've always had really good success with my rose growing, and I've always used Black Marvel, so I put it down to that. My gardenias are also needing a good feed at the moment, so I have gardenias placed just outside our chicken coop, and the reason being is that they obviously have a beautiful scent, and sometimes a chicken coop does not have a beautiful scent, so they need all the help they can get. So I'll be feeding my gardenias blood and bone, which is just fantastic for making them lovely, big, strong flowers. So I'll give them blood and bone, and I will also be doing my citrus plants. So citrus plants are quite heavy feeders. The roots are quite shallow and they love to have a really good feed. So I'll be giving them blood and bone, and I will also be giving them some poultry manure. Now, I obviously have poultry here. Their poop I put into our compost, and I'm slowly getting our compost bins going, but this is actually a pelletized poultry manure that I'm using. Don't ever use poultry manure straight from a chicken coop and put it straight onto plants. The reason being is that it's too hot and it will actually scorch the roots, so you don't want to do that. It's just way too hot, way too strong, so you need to at least age it I aged mine for about 6 months before I even consider putting it on the garden. But this is a pelletized poultry manure that I'm using today, and I will give all of our citrus a beautiful feed. So I'm just working around the weather at the moment because it keeps sprinkling on and off, but I've just cut back that rose. Definitely should have worn gloves. I don't know why I didn't put my gloves on. I definitely should have worn gloves, and I have cut back that rose to cut back all of that scale, so hopefully the scale is completely gone now off it. There is still some little bits there, so I've sprayed it with a white oil, and I will keep doing that. So with white oil you need to keep it up. I have just done that rose now, and I'm so much happier with it. I cut off a lot of it was dead. You could see in that video a lot of that was dead, so I really should have cut that back hard in July. So mental note for next year. Okay, so I'm just about finished. I will actually end up watering all those roses in off camera. I have been working in between showers today, but I've looked at the radar and there doesn't seem to be like a heavy shower enough to water in all that fertilizer that I've just put in those roses. So I'll give those roses a water off camera. But that's it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me in the garden. When I was fertilising all of those fruit trees and the roses, I know that the average hand is about 50 grams. That's what you can hold in your hands, about 50 grams. I have average size hands. So 50 grams, so I just followed according to the instructions. So you notice on the fruit trees I put 150 grams, so 3 handfuls. So just make sure that you pay attention to the rates on the back of the packet to make sure that you're not over fertilising, because you can burn things. So thank you so much for joining me in part 3 of my 4-part video series on my new garden maintenance routine. I will link that video for the pruning roses just here for you so that you can watch that. And thank you so much for joining me. I hope you join me next time. Bye.